I'm going to tell you about a very, very odd dream I had once. I was late at night, and right before I go to bed, I was thinking about God. And so I was falling asleep. I was thinking about what would it be like if I gave my entire life to God, dedicated everything to God? What if I trusted God completely? What if I went all in with God? Maybe it was those words, all in, that were subconsciously in my head, or maybe it's just because I just moved to Las Vegas. But that night I had a really weird dream. I dreamed I was playing poker with God. I know it's warped. It's a warped dream. Even the cards in the dream were warped. Not only were they warped, you can see they were all mixed up. Some cards were face up, some cards were face down, they were upside down, right side up. They were a mess, mixed up, just like me. So there I am, I'm across the table from God. Everybody wants to know, what did he look like? Well, he's hard to describe. He's shorter than you'd think he was. But other than that, he looked pretty much, like you think he did. And I noticed he was just looking at me, waiting, and I realized he was waiting for me to ante up. And as I looked down, I had a big pile of chips there, a much larger pile than I thought I had. I remember thinking, wow, I didn't realize I had that many chips. And each of these chips had a little GF marked onto it. And I knew that that meant God first. So I emptied up. God said, do you want me to shuffle and deal first, or do you want to? I took one look at the chip and I thought, you first. So God did an unusual thing. He shuffled in a most strange way. He pointed to the cards and he pointed to me. And then he went like this. Mixed the cards all different directions. No rhyme or reason to it. Cards flopping everywhere. He said, do you want to cut? I figured, well, if you can't trust God, who can you trust? So I said, no. He smiled and said, it's your bet. So I pushed a few of my chips forward. Not a lot of them. I didn't really know how much to trust God. I didn't know him that well. So I only pushed a few forward, and he smiled at that, and then he picked up the cards, and he dealt them, first to me and then to him. I said, you got 3 aces. He said, yeah. I didn't even look at my cards. What was the point? When it was my turn to shuffle the cards up, I thought, well, I'll shuffle them God style. So I did this. That's right, I was learning from God. I said, do you want to cut? He just said something about turning over a new leaf and turn the cards like that. And then he said, sure bet. And I realized that the first time when I thought he said, it's your bet, that he had actually said, sure bet, sure bet. And when he did, the cards all started to glow, and I knew that somehow God had done something to that deck. Even though I had messed them all up as much as I could, he had done something to set that deck up. So I thought very quickly, and I said, hey, look, there's Jimmy Cagney. Can't believe God fell for that. And he turns and he looks, and I took the top card real quick off the deck and slid it into the bottom like that, figuring if he had set up the deck somehow, that for sure would mess him up. Then when he turned back around to look, I placed my bet. I pushed all my chips forward. I went all in with God. Full of confidence, I dealt the cards. I said, you got the 3 aces again. He said, no, son. Full house. But you know what I learned that day? I learned if you will go all in with God, that he will always make sure that you are the winner. So today, we're going to talk about going all in with God. And since we're on a beach, I thought I should have a fancy drink. And the way we're going to talk about being all in God is a way that a lot of people hold back on, and that is financially. Remember Flip Wilson, anybody? Remember Flip? Flip had a show when I was young. He had a lot of different characters. One he played was a preacher in the church of the What's Happening Now church. And they did a sketch once where he says, if this church is going to serve God, it's got to get down on its knees and crawl. And they all answered, yes, make it crawl, preacher, make it crawl. And once this church has learned to crawl, it's got to get up on its feet and walk. Make it walk, preacher, make it walk. And once this church has learned to walk, it's got to learn to run. Make it run, preacher, make it run. And once it has learned to run, it's got to reach down deep in its pockets and learn to give. Make it crawl, preacher, make it crawl. Now look, if you're visiting with us for the very first time here today, I want you to know right off the bat that we don't talk about money very often around here. This is the second time in the history of this church that we've spoken about money, and no pastor likes to talk about money. In fact, a couple of weeks of the meeting, Brian said we need to talk about money. You do it. So here I am. And I know there's people out there thinking, don't talk about money, Pastor, talk about something spiritual. But you know what? There's nothing more spiritual than how you handle your money. It's the supreme test of where your heart is. Money is something that we use every day. It's the medium of our exchange. It's our very survival depends on it. Consider this, 88% of the population has more debts than assets. Money is a factor in 90% of all divorces. The average American family in America, yeah, that'd be good, carries a credit card debt, owes about $15,000 on that debt. Only 2% of Americans over 65 are financially stable. So how can Jesus Christ care about us and not care about what is so intrinsically valuable to us? I mean, it's tied to our very survival. So if you're thinking, well, I don't like it when the preacher talks about money, then you probably wouldn't have liked it when you listened to Jesus Christ preach. Because 2/3 of the parables that he taught on had to do with finances. The Bible addressed the topic of money more than any other topic. So God is interested in what you do with your money because it's an indication of your character. So, just to start off, let's define what we're talking about here today. We're talking about tithes and offerings. Tithe is a Old Testament word that means 10% of the increase of my wealth to the Lord. 10% of the increase of my wealth. That's the money that's coming in. So if a frost came in and wiped out your crops this year, in other words, if something happened and you lost your job and you don't have a check coming in, this is not your season to tithe. Okay? That's good. Well, why a percentage? Well, because 10% is completely fair to everybody. That's a percentage, a small amount of what you make. Why 10%? I think they figured that out because it was simple. Simple. Move the decimal. 10% of $100, $10. 10% of $1,000, $100. 10% of $845, $84.50. It's easy. An offering is usually defined as anything over the 10% tithe. All right, so let's just get this out of the way. How did this all start? The history of tithing. You should know this. The earliest biblical reference is 4,600 years ago. When Abraham got through a war, fairly unscathed, he had rescued his relative Lot. And the Bible mentions that Abraham went off to Melchizedek, a king and a priest of God, and he gave him 1/10 of everything he owned. So he got a lot, and he wanted to give back a little. Oh, come on, that's a good joke. I made it up. You rescued Lot, you get, never mind. All right. Let's take a look at Genesis. It's in your program notes. I'm going to follow along. It'll be behind this as well. It goes like this. After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer And his allied kings, the king of Sodom, came out to greet him in the valley of Sheba and the king's valley. Melchizedek. Yeah, I had to look up at how all these were pronounced. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was priest of the high God and blessed him. He said, "Blessed be Abram by the high God, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be the high God who handed your enemies over to you." And Abram gave him 1/10 of all the recovered plunder. So they took all the spoils of war, all their increase, and they gave the priests 10% of that for the continuation of God's work. And later in Genesis, you may remember the story. Jacob is sleeping in the desert, and he has a dream in which God says, "I'm going to give you all this land for you and your descendants, and they will all be blessed." And Jacob called the place Bethel and made a vow. And his vow went like this: "If God stands by me and protects me on this journey on which I'm setting out, keeps me in food and clothing, and brings me back in one piece to my father's house, this God will be my God. This stone that I have set up as a memorial pillar will mark this as a place where God lives. And everything you give to me, I'll return 1/10 to you." In essence, Jacob was saying, if God protects and provides for me, I'll set up this altar, recognize this as a place of worship and sacrifice, and I'll return to God 1/10 of everything that was given to us. Now, up to this point, it's done voluntarily. Both these guys came up with this on their own. It's not a law or commandment or anything like that. But I guess God liked this law, because later on, when the Jews said, "We need laws," they went to Moses with this, and this was one of the laws that Moses presented to them. 1/10 of the land's produce, whether grain from the ground or fruit from the trees, is God's. It is holy to God. 1/10 of the entire herd of flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod, is holy to God. So it became a law. Obviously, not everybody followed this law, because a few hundred years later, in Malachi, God says this: "I am God. Yes, I am." It's like, I am Sam. Sam, I am. Yeah. "I am God. Yes, I am. I haven't changed. And because I haven't changed, you, the descendants of Jacob, haven't been destroyed. You have a long history of ignoring my commands. You haven't done a thing I've told you. Return to me, so I can return to you," says the God of the angel armies. And you ask, but how do we return? Begin by being honest. Do honest people rob God? But you rob me day after day. You ask, how have we robbed you? The tithe and the offering. That's how. And now you're in a curse, the whole lot of you, because you're robbing me. Note this. He did not say, "I placed a curse on you." He did not say, "I did this." He's saying, because of the choices made, you are living under a curse because of the choices you have made. This is a self-imposed curse. Then he continues, he says, "Bring your full tithe to the temple treasury, so there will be ample provisions in my temple. Test me in this, and see if I don't open up heaven itself to you and pour out blessings beyond your wildest dreams. For my part, I will defend you against marauders, protect your wheat fields and vegetable gardens against plunderers." This is one of the most remarkable passages in the Bible, because this is the one time in the entire Bible that God actually tells his people, "Test me. Test me on this," he says. "See if I'm telling the truth." It's the only time in Scripture this happens. Proverbs 3 says, "If you honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." And God says, "Test me on this." So now we've heard from Abraham, we've heard from Jacob, from Moses, Malachi. Now we hear from Jesus. Jesus is talking to the Jewish leader, and Jesus says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, but have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done, but not to leave these undone." Jesus said, you were right to have tithe, but you also should have done these other things. Tithing is a basic foundation. There's much more to it all than that. Tithing is not an excuse for living life any old way that you want to live it. So Abraham commenced it. Jacob continued it. Moses commanded it. Malachi confirmed it. And then later Jesus commended it. So who am I to cancel it? I'm going to say something that you've probably never heard another pastor say. I don't think I've actually ever heard anybody say this at church, but you know what? God doesn't need your money. That's not the part. People have said that. Let me continue. God doesn't need your money, but the church does. The church does. Just being honest here, church does need your money. I've heard pastors say, well, God will provide for us. Yes, he will. And you know how he does that? Through you. It takes money to keep a church going. And even though we are unbelievably blessed with our many, many volunteers around here, you see them in the blue shirts, they do so much work around here, they do all the service things, there's still things that need to be paid for around here. And they are an amazing blessing to us. We call them the dream team. But still, there are finances, bottom line truth. Without any income, no church can sustain itself. That income comes from people who see the good that the church is doing and want to support it. I believe the hope of the world lies with the local church. I really do. Bill Hybel tells a story about, he was sitting in an airport and there's this little kid running around. The kid's a nightmare. He's just running around and stuff. The parents aren't paying any attention whatsoever. And everybody in the waiting room is kind of looking at this kid and rolling their eyes with each other. And finally, the dad, just out of nowhere, gets up, grabs this kid, baps him on the back of the head, shoves him down in the chair. The mom sitting next to him hits him like this. And the kid just goes into this little... Who's going to help that kid? Not the parents. They're not going to show that kid the way. Not the schools. They're not going to show that kid. Who's going to teach that kid that he has worth? Who's going to teach that kid that he is loved? Who's going to teach that kid that he is the son of the King of Kings and that makes him a prince? Who's going to show that boy that he is the son of the God Most High and he has worth? Not the government. It's the church. The church is going to do that. I also believe that the Bible teaches the church, teaches that the tithe is supposed to go to the local church, not to TV evangelists or to other ministries, but to the local church, to your church. It says in Malachi, right there, it says, bring your full tithe to the temple treasury. The temple is the church. It's where the people worship. I love this whole idea myself, but I like potluck suppers. People bring potlucks, and you bring one little item to it, and then everybody brings it. You've got more than enough there to feed everybody. More than enough. Food to share. Same idea with the church. This is a place where people learn the truth of their Heavenly Father's love for them. This is the place where people come and receive prayer like they did this morning here. This is the place where people young and old can grow together in their faith. People can come and serve and make a difference in the lives of others. This is the place people can experience the presence of God. Church is the place where we find hope and life and peace, and where that kid will learn that he has worth. This is a place where lives are changed week after week after week. You see it happen. People come in here broken. They walk in that back door there and they are lost and they are searching for a better way. And they find that better way here at this church. I've seen lives go from addiction to freedom. I've seen shattered relationships healed. I've seen marriages saved. I've seen lonely people come in here and get connected. I've seen people who are wandering lost find direction and purpose in life. That's what this church does. I've seen people learn to manage their anger and forgive those that have hurt them. I've seen people discover their worth. It's why we support these places. It's why we do this and why we support this place. And when all of those lives are changed, it goes out like a ripple effect. And those lives change other lives, and those lives change other lives. Wow! That's why we support this place. The church in Corinth said to its people, "You will be made rich every day so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God." We could say the same thing about the Springs. Through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. It's about spiritual growth. And not just other people's spiritual growth, but your spiritual growth too. It's about our spiritual growth. Deuteronomy 14 says, "The purpose of tithing is to teach you to always put God in first place in your life." Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." There's an old joke, people are always willing to give God credit, but not to give him cash. This is putting your money where your mouth is, really. Tithing is an act of worship. It's evidence of growing faith. And it proves that God can trust me with more. One of the biblical reasons God gives us wealth is to share it with others. Wouldn't it be sad if one day you got to heaven and you discovered that the reason God didn't give you more wealth while you were here on earth was because he couldn't rely on you to share it with others? Tithing keeps me focused on others. Every time my wife and I write that check, it's a reminder that other people matter. It keeps me one step ahead of that selfishness and greed that might lurk in the darkness of my heart. Strong the force is. Strong the dark side is. That was for Jim. There are reasons that are wrong to give. Fear. We don't give out of fear. I heard people say, "I don't want God to curse me," like it says in Malachi. Again, that was a misinterpretation of that scripture. God didn't put the curse on them when he said you are living under a curse. It's a self-imposed curse for not following his ways. So don't give out of fear. That's the wrong motivation. And you don't have to give God anything to make him love you. Know that. God loves you immensely. And it's not based on your giving or your serving or how much you read the Bible or your church attendance. None of that. God loves you anyway. You don't give a gift to somebody anyway to make them love you. That doesn't make sense. You give it to somebody to show them that you love them. We don't give to be blessed. We give because we are blessed. You give because it's a great thing to be able to team up with God and others to help people. It's sort of a co-op around here. Really, we're all a team. We're all invested in this venture together. We give of our skills and we give of our gifts. And we give a little bit of our money too. So why doesn't everyone give? Because money is a big deal to us. Let's face it, we get caught up in it. Anybody remember flypaper? They make that anymore? When I was a kid, we had flypaper. It came in a little tube and you pulled it down and it was like this yellow strip that went like that. And the flies, it was coated with some sort of very sweet honey kind of a substance. And the flies, you must have that in the back of the South. Yeah. They're just discovering it in Arkansas. It's all coated with some sort of a sweet honey-like substance, right? I don't know that it's honey. I never really licked any. Sure. I'm not from Arkansas. But the fly would come in and it would see the honey and it would land in there and it would be eating the honey and be saying to itself, I got the honey, I got the honey, I got the honey, I got the honey. And then it would try and leave. And the flypaper would be saying, I got the fly. People are like that too. We run around and we're thinking, I want the money, or I got the money, I got the money, I got the money. And then the money's saying, I got the guy. Jesus said, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for a man's life does not consist of the abundance of his possessions. You're seeing the bumper sticker. Person who dies with the most toys wins. This is not true. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. I think we all know the truth of that. I mean, it's a very, very rare man that on his deathbed is going to say, yeah, I sure wish I'd had a lot more stuff. But 10%, isn't that a lot? Somebody said, you know, it'd be a good marketing campaign for a church. So I did it up. The Springs Church. Home of the 5% tithe. That ought to bring them in. There's a whole lot of jokes that people tell about it. You know, the pastor's looking in the offering bag and he says, well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is there's more than enough money here to take care of the church and the community. The bad news is it's still in your wallets. Some people say if I had more money to give, I'd give more. Probably not. I'm not questioning your word there or anything, but the Bible clearly states that if we aren't faithful with a little, we won't be faithful with much. Amen. It's an attitude of generosity, and it starts on whatever level you're at. That's why we use a percentage, 10%. It's fair for everybody. There's a good story about a wealthy guy that came to the pastor. He says, you know, pastor, you know, this 10% thing is really, it's hard. The thing is, I make $500,000 a year. 10% is $50,000. I can't give away $50,000. Pastor says, pray with me. God, please reduce this man's income so he can afford to give. Look, if 10% scares you, I get it, because I understand it. But you know what? Give 5% a shot then for a while. Check that out. See how that works for you. There are other reasons that people don't want to give. We don't do an offering here at the Springs. I'll talk about why in a minute. But this is a little poem I wrote, and it takes place as the offering bag goes down the row. And it goes like this. They were the lucky, lost, now saved. They bowed their heads in silent prayer. The hymn played softly, sweet and low. A velvet bag passed down the row. The first thinks, I can't feed my family, never mind the masses. Times are tough and work is rough, and so the bag he passes. His wife, she fears her husband. She knows that he would blast if she gave the cash they'd saved, and so the bag she passed. The next man doesn't trust the system or the upper classes. The cash may go to some church CEO, and so the bag he passes. The fourth would not succumb to guilt. He would not be harassed. He would not fear or shed a tear, and so the bag he passed. This church is big enough, Mom thinks, without the extra classes. This way my son will get attention, and so the bag she passes. The sixth fears they will support AIDS, folks in moral crevasses. If she puts in, she'll condone sin, and so the bag she passes. The seventh hated homeless bums, dangerous and crass. He would no more support the poor, and so the bag he passed. The next man found an empty bag when it arrived at last. If no one else gave, who could he save? So the bag he passed. And at the end of the row sat Jesus, empty bag clutched in his grasp. He shed a tear. They'd failed to hear the lessons that he'd passed. There's a lot of excuses. But honestly, mostly, that's what they are, excuses. They're justification not to part with our money. Jesus said no one can serve two masters. Either he'll hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. Look, we know it's hard. And we don't want to put pressure on anyone, really. And we feel so strongly about it, that's the reason that we do not pass an offering plate here at the Springs. We don't want anybody to feel peer pressure of any kind. We figured if we did pass an offering plate, we'd have to have these shirts printed up. So, if I didn't put any money in, I could just... Takes the pressure off. You can give online, by the way. So what we have here is collection boxes on the way out. And if on your way out after church and you feel like it, you put money into the box. You put your tithe, you put your offering. And you should know that nobody knows how much money anybody puts in, except for the treasurer. She's the only person that knows. Brian doesn't know. I don't know. We don't want to know. Because here's the thing, folks. If you give, we don't want you to give out of pressure. We want you to give out of love. Love. Love for God. Love for people. Love for the church here and what we're doing here. 2 Corinthians says it's going to be on the screen, but that's a different translation. You can read that. I'm going to read you a translation I liked a little bit better. And it goes like this. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give. Not reluctantly or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver. Cheerful giver. Suppose you and your wife are about to celebrate an anniversary. You go to her and you say, well, I got you this present. Here you go. I had to get you something. I knew you'd be mad if I didn't. And I didn't want to, but everybody says I have to. So I spent way too much money on it, but here you go. Hope you enjoy it. She's not gonna. God's the same way. He doesn't want you to give grudgingly. He wants you to feel so much love in your heart for him that you want to give. So much gratefulness for your church here that you want to give. Not grudgingly, not reluctantly, not under compulsion. Cheerfully. And thankfully. Because probably the most significant principle in giving is to finally realize that everything that I have, I've been giving to God anyway. It was all from him first. I'm just giving back a little bit of it. When my children were little, we went to McDonald's one day, and bought some French fries for my son, and he was eating them. I reached over and took one of his French fries, and he was like, no! I said, what? He said, my French fries. Really? I reached over and took another one. My French fries. And what he didn't realize at all, was that he wouldn't have those French fries if I hadn't given them to him. And they were my French fries, really. And I gave them to him. And I could have gone and bought more French fries for myself, but that wasn't the point, because I was trying to teach my son that it's good to share. To give back a little bit. And to not even think about that. Yeah, have some more. First Corinthians 29. David is praying for the offering. And this is what he says. And I'm going to read this whole thing to you because it says so much. It goes like this. Now, our God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name. But me? Who am I and who are these people that we should presume to be giving something to you? Everything comes from you. All we're doing is giving back what we've been given from your generous hand. As far as you're concerned, we're homeless, shiftless wanderers like our ancestors. Our lives are mere shadows, hardly anything to us. God, our God, all these materials, these piles of stuff for building a house of worship for you, honoring your holy name, it all came from you. It was yours in the first place. I know, dear God, that you care nothing for the surface. You want us, our true selves. So I have given from the heart, honestly and happily. And now see all these people doing the same, giving freely and willingly. What a joy. Oh God, God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, keep this generous spirit alive forever in these people. Always keep their hearts set firmly in you. That could be my prayer for you guys. Now, before I wrap it up here, I'm going to call the worship team back up, and you guys come right on up and just set right up right here. You don't have to wait. Just come right on up. But as they're doing that, I want to go back over one more thing, and that is this test me thing. Let's talk about the test me thing. The statement God gives, he says, test me and see if I don't open up the floodgates of heaven to you and pour out blessings beyond your wildest dreams. This does not mean that if I give $100, I'm guaranteed to get 1,000 back. It's not a spiritual lottery. You're not playing the holy trifecta. God, Holy Spirit, Son, 10 to 1 odds. That's not it. It doesn't work that way. But there are only 2 times in the Bible that the phrase open the floodgates of heaven happens. And the first one is when this guy named Noah is asked to build a little boat because the floodgates of heaven are going to open up. And that resulted in a major deluge, global in scale. And the second time is in reference to this, to blessings being poured out on tithers. The truth is, guys, I gotta tell you, there are times when I really don't feel like the floodgates of heaven are opened up on me. There are times when life is really, it's tough. And it can be discouraging. And I sometimes say, where's my floodgates? But this, honestly, is a really narrow viewpoint, maybe even blind. Because if I stop and think about it, compared to 95% of the world, I live in great wealth. I have a house to live in. I have clothing to wear. I have a car. 2. I have food every day. I have clean water. That alone puts me ahead of 95% of the world. Where might my life be if it wasn't for God's grace and generosity pouring out on me? He says, for my part, I will defend you against marauders. What kind of marauders might you have in your life? Addiction? Depression? Loneliness? Fear? These are the kind of marauders that come into our modern day lives. And I'll tell you something, I promise you, the closer you get to God, the more you give to Him from your heart, the stronger your defense will be against those kinds of things. Promise you. And this tested me on this thing. Okay, here we go. I gotta confess. When I first started to tithe, I wasn't that mature a Christian yet. And so this test me thing, I was the kind of a Christian that questioned everything. Everything. I challenged everything. And so when I finally decided to tithe, I was thinking, okay, I will test you on this. And all I can tell you is, here I am many, 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 many years later, and I've never stopped tithing. And I'll tell you what we're going to do here, and this is kind of crazy, but if you're in the test me on this mode, I get it. We're going to do something that's kind of silly almost, but we give you a 90-day money-back guarantee. How's that? No, seriously, if you decide to tithe, starting today, and at the end of 90 days that you don't feel that God has supplied you, as this passage says it will, let us know. We will give you your 90 days money back. However, when giving comes from the heart of thanksgiving and generosity and cheerfulness, we are promised that it will be returned to us in some way. It might be financial, but it also might be spiritual. It might be in some measure of peace. It might be in the joy of seeing what your money did and the changes that the church brought to other people's lives. It might be in that. But I guarantee you it will be returned. It will change your life. And I also guarantee that you, having done that, will have directly participated in changing other lives. What a cool thing is that? You may never hear about it. I had a lady walk up to me one day and say, you know, you probably don't remember me. And I didn't. And she said, but you prayed with me down front a little over a year ago. Changed my life. She said, I'm now a little over a year addiction-free. She said, I now have a good man in my life. I got a good job. Because you prayed for me, and it changed my life. I said, well, it wasn't me, you know. God changed your life. But the fact is, I didn't remember her. But we have effects on people. Can you imagine how incredibly one day when you get to heaven and somebody walks up to you and says, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you go, what? I don't even know you. They say, no. You tied to your church, and your church took some of this money, and they did this with it, and this changed my life. And I got to know God through that. And because I got to know God, I told other people about God, and they told other, and it saved not only me, it saved my entire family and my friends. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a great feeling. Could happen one day. That's going to be awesome. I get to get up every day and do this with you. Every Sunday I get to team up with all these people in blue shirts, and we get to do this. I think there are three really significant times in a Christian's life. One is that day that you decide to accept Christ into your heart. That come forward moment. Everybody here that's done it probably remembers exactly where they were. It's a big moment. The second one is baptism. When you decide to stand in front of a group of people and declare your love for this God and that you are going to walk this path and hold me accountable to that. That's a big moment too. We have baptisms coming up in next week. Next week? Yeah, next week. And if you are ready to take that moment, that step forward, come on. There's sign up out there in the lobby. Today's the last day to sign up for that. So think about that. But I think the third one, the third big step spiritually that is when you finally decide to tithe. And you know what? For some people, it takes years to get there. But that's a big one too. That day when you finally decide, I'm going to go all in with God. Now, I don't know where you are this morning in your walk, but everything that's significant starts with a decision. And if you haven't decided to come forward and accept Christ yet, please come forward after and talk to me, and we'll do that together. And if you haven't done your baptism yet, sign up out there. If you want to know more about that, talk to Brian or talk to myself. And if you haven't tithed yet, maybe today's the day you want to go home and talk to your spouse about it. It's a team thing. It's not something you do without discussing with your husband or wife. And the rest of your family, for that matter. Talk to them about it and explain how you feel about it and why you would like to take this next big step. And we hope to see you here week after week after week. supporting this church, not just with your money, but with your talents, with your gifts, with your treasure. Time, talent, treasure. We appreciate that. I'm going to pray for us now. Please join me. Father God, thank you so much. Thank you because we are grateful that we get to team up with you to change lives. What an honor. For those that are struggling financially right now, I'd like to pray specifically for them that you would bring them a blessing, a job if it's needed, a little extra income of some sort. This is a big deal to us, and we know it's a big deal to you because it's a big deal to us. So I pray for everybody in this room. I'd like to pray a blessing on everyone here, that we can work as a team together and get it done and go all in with God. Amen.